Hey, thanks for joining us. This is our final week of the Summer Rewind series. Our regular live stream will be back next week, celebrating Jess and Chris as they become our new senior pastors. But this week, we look back at a message that Steve Sutton gave in our PM service on God is kind.
Well, for those of you who are here this morning, I spoke on the subject of doing good, and Simon said, "Oh, you can just preach what you preached this morning." I just can't do that. I'd bore myself to tears if I had to do that. But I've got another message here on the subject of kindness, which kind of dovetails very much with what I shared this morning. In fact, it probably fleshes out my message this morning on doing good and provides some practical thoughts on how we can actually express goodness. There's an author by the name of Henry James, and he wrote this. He said, "Three things in human life are important. The first is to be kind, the second is to be kind, and the third is to be kind." I think this guy, Henry James, is giving us a hint on what he believes is incredibly important to be a decent human being. I do agree with him. What is kindness? If we went around the room and asked you to give a description of what kindness is, I'm sure we would come up with a lot of different ideas. But for me, kindness is actually simply love in action. 1 Corinthians 13:4 says that love is kind. And so for me, kindness is just simply love in action. It's love with clothes on. Mark Twain said that kindness is a language which the deaf can hear and the blind can see. And I think if there's anything that really grabs people's attention, it's when they encounter kindness. I don't know about you, but I know when someone does a kind gesture for me, it warms my heart. It softens my heart. And the Dalai Lama, who I'm sure we would disagree about a whole host of things, but one thing I really agree with him on is this particular quote that he made. He said, "My religion is very simple. My religion is kindness." And if you were to ask me what is my religion, and I would say in a nutshell, if I was to distill what it means for me to be a Christian, it means one word: kindness. I think Jesus is the kindest person that we will ever meet. And I personally believe that if our Christian faith doesn't outwork itself and is visible in terms of kindness, then I'm not quite sure what we have embraced, what we've adopted, but it may be something that we need to think about in terms of how we're structuring our relationship with God. Why is it that some people are naturally kind and other people just don't seem to have cultivated kindness in their lives? Is there a kindness gene? Well, I've done a little bit of research, and as far as I can tell, there is no genetic predisposition towards kindness. I was very fortunate. I grew up in a home with a mum who was incredibly kind, and so she modelled kindness for me, which I hope I've learned a little bit from. But for me, kindness is actually a muscle. We've all got the capacity for kindness within us. It's whether we choose to exercise that kindness muscle or not. That determines whether we are kind or not, or to the depth or the degree to which we are kind. And it's just something that I want to urge you to develop and cultivate in your life. And I think the key to growing our kindness muscle is actually understanding that God is kind. God is fundamentally kind. Everything God does is an expression of his kindness. I've just got one verse here. Isaiah 63 verse 7 says, I will tell of the kindnesses, that's plural, I will tell of the kindnesses of the Lord, the deeds for which he is to be praised, according to all the Lord has done for us. Yes, the many good things he has done for Israel, according to his compassion and many kindnesses. And I read that verse and I just have the sense in which God is a person or someone who oozes kindness. This lovely scripture, Romans 2:4 says, don't you see how wonderfully kind, tolerant and patient God is with you? What a great verse. I need verses like that in the Bible to remind me of God's posture and attitude towards me. Don't you see how wonderfully kind, tolerant and patient God is with you? And Luke chapter 6 verse 36, Jesus said, our Father is kind, you be kind. What a great little summary of who God is. God is kind. Now you go and be a chip off the old block and do what God does. So we're going to look at a few things, ways in which we can express kindness. Number one, we're to be kind to those who are close to us. 1 Thessalonians 5:15 says, always try and be kind to each other and to everyone. We need to practice the art of kindness with those who make up our inner circle. If we're fortunate enough to be married or have a partner, a spouse or partner, our kids, if we have children, friends, and our church community, those that we go to school with. There's a guy by the name of John Gottman. Who's heard of the psychologist John Gottman? Okay. He spent 4 decades studying thousands of couples to figure out what makes relationships work. Why are some relationships successful and others aren't? And this guy, John Gottman, can predict up to 94% accuracy whether a couple will break up or stay together, or whether their relationship will be happy or unhappy. That's a pretty high statistic. 94%, just by observing a couple for a short period of time, he can tell whether their relationship they will stay together, or whether their relationship will be successful, happy or unhappy. And he has discovered that relational success comes down to one single factor, and that is whether couples are kind and generous towards one another. And he said that kindness is the most significant predictor of satisfaction and stability in close, intimate relationships. And he says that kindness is the glue that actually holds people together. So I want you to stop for a moment and just think about your relationship with the people that are closest to you, your spouse, your partner, your parents, whatever it might be, and just think how kind, and rate yourself out of 5, how kind towards those people are you? Just pause and think about that. How kind are you in your relationships with those you are closest to? All right, the next group of people that we need to be kind to is to be strangers. This lovely verse in Hebrews 13 says, don't forget to extend your hospitality to all, even to strangers. For as you know, some have unknowingly shown kindness to angels in this way. Who's heard of Desmond Tutu, this guy up here? Revolutionary, a wonderful, wonderful man. When he was asked by the BBC to identify the defining moment in his life, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, he was a great South African leader who spoke up against apartheid. And one day, he and his mother, as he was a young child, he was walking down the street with his mum, and this very tall, dignified white man dressed in a black suit came walking towards them. And Desmond was 9-year-old at the time, and the apartheid system within South Africa, that apartheid is where there was a separate black people and white people were separated, and there was a hierarchy within society where whites were considered to be superior to black people. And I just can't believe that that system was in place in my lifetime, but it was. And the rule of the day was under apartheid, when a black person and a white person met on a footpath, the black person was to step aside to allow the white person to pass first, and the black person was required to nod their head at the white person as a gesture of respect. But on this particular occasion, when little Desmond was walking with his mum, this man in a black suit, that white man coming towards him, he stood off the pavement and he nodded his head in respect to Desmond and his mum, and he allowed them to walk by. And this white man was a man by the name of Trevor Huddleston, who was an Anglican priest who was bitterly opposed to apartheid, the segregation of black and white people. And that moment changed Desmond Tutu's life. His mum explained to him that Trevor Huddleston was a minister, a man of God. And in that moment, Desmond Tutu said he found his calling in his life. And he told the BBC this when he was interviewed. When she told me that he was an Anglican priest, I decided there and then I wanted to be an Anglican priest too. And what is more, I wanted to be a man of God. You know, we never know the impact that a simple act of kindness towards a stranger can have. That man just stepping aside and acknowledging a little black boy changed South African history. So rate yourself between 1 to 5. How kind are you to strangers? The checkout person in Coles or Woolies or Aldi or wherever it is you shop, or people that you just casually meet as you go about life. How kind are you? Then the third group of people that we're to be kind to is to the poor. Proverbs 19:17 says, "He who is kind to the poor lends to the Lord, and God will pay back what he has given." One of my heroes is a guy by the name of Tony Campolo. I don't know if anybody's familiar with him. I would highly recommend that you read his books. And one day, Tony Campolo was telling the story about a friend of his, a lady by the name of Claire, who pastors a church in Bel Air, California. And Bel Air is the place where the movie stars live and the ultra wealthy. And there's a department store in Bel Air called Nordstrom's. And each Christmas, this lady Claire, a pastor, gets a Nordstrom's shopping bag, and she fills it with tissue paper to make it look like she's actually shopping in Nordstrom's. But because she's a pastor, she can't afford to, you see. So, but she likes the ambience of the store during Christmas, and she just likes to walk around there. And on one of her Christmas visits to Nordstrom's, she was on the floor where some of the most expensive dresses in the world are sold. It's the place where movie stars go to buy their clothing. And as she's browsing, she notices this destitute lady come into this area. And Claire fully expects that a security guard is going to come along and grab this destitute lady and take her out of the store, because she's definitely not the kind of person that could afford to buy clothes at Nordstrom's. But instead of a security guard, a very tall, stately looking saleswoman goes up to this homeless lady and asks her, Can I be of assistance to you, madam? And this homeless lady responds in a very gruff voice, "Yes, I want a dress." And the saleswoman said, "Well, what kind of dress would you like?" And she said, I want a party dress." "Well, you've come to the right place," the saleswoman said. "We have the finest dresses in the world." And so the two women looked over the dresses as they talked about which colour would suit her eyes and her hair. And after a discussion that went on for more than 10 minutes, they picked two extremely expensive dresses off the rack. Then the saleswoman said to this destitute lady, would you please follow me? I want you to try these dresses on to see how you will look in each of them. Now, this lady Claire, who was a pastor, was observing this scene, and she knew the saleswoman must have realised this lady didn't have the money to buy either of the dresses. So when the two women went into the dressing room to try on the dresses, this lady Claire couldn't resist the temptation. She went into the dressing room next to her and began to listen in on the conversation that was taking place. And so she put her ear up against the dressing room wall so she could hear what was being said. And she could hear the homeless woman after a while, after she tried the two dresses on. She said, I've changed my mind. I'm not going to buy a dress today. And the saleswoman answered, she said, well, that's quite all right, madam, but I'd like you to take my card. Should you come back to Nordstrom, I would consider it both a privilege and a pleasure to wait on you again. This lady Claire, this pastor, was amazed by what she had witnessed. So she went up to the sales lady to ask, what was all that about? Why were you treating this lady in such a dignifying way? And as she walked up closer to her, she saw a little pin on her top with the words WWJD. What would Jesus do? In that moment, Claire realised that this sales lady had obviously figured out how Jesus would have treated this homeless woman, and that's with kindness. A theologian by the name of Dietrich Bonhoeffer says that God comes to us in the form of the beggar, of the dissolute human child in ragged clothes asking for help. He confronts you in every person that you meet. As long as there are people, Christ will walk earth as your neighbour. So I want you to stop again, just rate yourself 1 to 5. How are you when you come across people who are poor, marginalised, different to you? Give yourself a rating 1 to 5. And then number 4, the fourth group that we're to be kind to is to be kind to our enemies. Jesus said, love your enemies, do good and lend, hoping for nothing in return, and your reward will be great, and you will be sons of the highest. For God is kind to the unthankful and evil. Just before I got married, anybody who knows me will know that I'm not the most practical, handy kind of person. I'm useless with tools. In fact, my first job I worked in Woolworths, and I was working in the, what's the section called? Where they sell tools and stuff like that, in that department. Sorry? Hardware, that's right. I didn't even know the department I was working in. I was working in the hardware. And somebody came in and asked for a jigsaw. So I sent them down to the toy department because I didn't realise that a jigsaw was actually a tool. I'm useless, but I got a job just before we got married. We were in Bible college together, and I got a job working in a factory making screen doors. And it was the worst job ever. It was just not a good job fit, but gave us some money to help pay for the wedding. But the problem with this particular job was the guy that was my supervisor was so horrible. I used to think they used to drive into work on a morning devising ways in which he could try and make me as miserable as possible that day. It's just this one of these guys that I just did not hit it off with. And it was my final day at work, and I was just ready to get married, and I'm having this conversation with God. And I'm saying, God, if I worked here for 12 months, I would never invite this guy to my wedding. Such a horror. He's just a horrible, horrible man. God, in fact, if I worked here for 2 years, I would not invite this man to my wedding. There's no way he would ever get invited to my wedding. God, if I worked in this place for 5 years, I would never invite him to my wedding. In fact, God, if I worked here for 10 years, I would never invite him to my wedding. And as I'm saying these words, God, I would never invite this man to my wedding, I heard what I think was God speaking to me. I'm saying I would never invite him to my wedding, and these words came into my mind. That's funny. I've invited him to mine. At the end of history, there is what is called the wedding feast or the banquet. It's a time of celebration where every single person on the planet is welcome to sit at that table, regardless of how good you've been, how bad you've been. It doesn't matter. Everyone is invited to that wedding feast. And here I am saying, God, I'd never invite this man to my wedding, and God's saying to me, hey, well, that's funny. He's invited to everyone is welcome. No matter how bad they treat you, you've got to treat people kindly. Please don't ask me whether I invited him to my wedding or not, okay? But think about enemy love is actually if you like, one of the defining characteristics of Christianity. And have a think about your enemies, the people that you don't get on with, the people that mistreat you. Have a think about your relationship with them and rate yourself 1 out of 5 in terms of your level of kindness towards them. And then finally, the fifth person that you need to demonstrate kindness to is to yourself. Some of us are kind to everyone. We'll be kind to those that we're close to. We're kind to strangers, we're kind to the poor, we're kind to our enemies. But sometimes we can be really, really hard on ourselves. There's a beautiful scripture in Matthew 11:30 that says, "For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." And that word there, easy, in the original language in which the New Testament written is the word kind. My yoke is kind. And a yoke is a contraption that was used to harness two oxen together. And usually they would put a strong ox or an old mature ox with a young weak ox. And in that partnership, the strong ox, the old ox, would carry all of the weight. It was kind. The young ox thought they were carrying the weight, but they weren't really. It was and this is the relationship that Jesus talks about that we're in with him. That actually he's the strong one. He carries all the weight, and he's actually incredibly kind to us. So I want to encourage you, go easy on yourself. Proverbs 11:17, and I'll finish on this point, says that your kindness will reward you. Your kindness will reward you. Kindness actually brings a benefit into our life. And just on a purely physiological level, whenever we do good, our brain releases a hormone called oxytocin. And oxytocin is a natural wonder drug. It improves our sense of vitality by lowering our blood pressure, reduces anxiety, increases blood circulation to the point where it changes the way we look so that we actually look younger. So you can actually throw away the Botox and just start being kind. Kindness actually comes with its reward. It actually brings benefit into our own lives. I said at the beginning that kindness is a muscle, and I just want to encourage you. Strengthen your kindness muscle. Make a commitment, even tonight, about how you're going to live your life over the coming week, how you're going to treat those who are closest to you, how you're going to treat the stranger that you'll bump into, how you're going to treat the poor when you encounter the poor, how you're going to respond to your enemies, those who mistreat you, and finally, how you're going to be kind to yourself. Don't be so harsh on yourself. So I'll leave that with you.
Thanks for joining us for our online worship service this week. If you haven't already connected with us, be sure to connect online. You can jump on our website or connect through one of our social media channels. And if you happen to be in the Ballarat area one Sunday, be sure to stop by. We'd love to meet you in person. Until next time, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May his face shine upon you and give you peace. Thanks.